The Tower of Babel and the challenge of Ibrahim in the ancient land of Mesopotamia, under the rule of the mighty King Nimrod. A tale of defiance, pride, and divine retribution unfolded. The Tower of Babel, a massive structure reaching for the heavens, stood as a symbol of human ambition. Nimrod, a king whose arrogance knew no bounds, had decided to challenge the very essence of divinity itself. His grand vision was not just to build a tower, but to establish his dominance over the gods, especially over Ibrahim, the man of faith who had rejected his rule. Nimrod had long believed in his power, believing that his kingship was a gift from the gods themselves. His ego was unshakable, and he saw the worship of any god other than himself as a direct threat to his authority. But there was one man who stood as a thorn in his side: Ibrahim. Ibrahim had defied Nimrod's orders, rejecting his gods and the tyranny that the king imposed on the people. In a world where monarchs held divine-like power, Ibrahim's unwavering faith in a single god challenged the very foundation of the king's rule. As the Tower of Babel grew taller with each passing day, so did Nimrod's arrogance. The tower, a colossal structure built to defy the heavens, symbolized the king's intention to elevate humanity to the gods' level. Nimrod spoke to his people with great pride, declaring that no force divine or earthly could match the power of his kingdom. The tower was not merely an architectural feat. It was Nimrod's personal challenge to God himself. "I shall destroy the very God you worship, Ibrahim," Nimrod would say in his court, his voice booming with conviction. "This tower will stand as proof of my supremacy. The gods will bow to me." But Ibrahim was not intimidated. He knew that the true God, the creator of all things, was beyond Nimrod's grasp. Ibrahim's rejection of idolatry and his devotion to the one true God had earned him a reputation throughout the land. He was a man of unwavering faith, willing to stand alone against the might of a king and his empire. In a quiet corner of the kingdom, Ibrahim gathered his followers. They were few, but their faith was strong, and their conviction was unwavering. Ibrahim knew that he had a mission, not just to challenge Nimrod's arrogance, but to show the people of the land the futility of worshiping idols and false gods. It was not just about a battle between two men. It was a battle between truth and falsehood, between faith and tyranny. Word spread quickly throughout the kingdom that Ibrahim had publicly denounced Nimrod's tower, calling it a monument to human pride and folly. This bold act of defiance stirred both admiration and fear. The people whispered of Ibrahim's courage, but many were afraid to speak out against the king. Nimrod's spies were everywhere, and to speak ill of the king or his grand tower was a crime punishable by death. One evening, as the sun set behind the towering structure, Nimrod called for Ibrahim to appear before him. The challenge was set. Nimrod had long been hearing of Ibrahim's words and deeds, and he could no longer ignore the growing whispers among the people. It was time to confront Ibrahim, to either force him into submission or silence him forever. "Ibrahim!" Nimrod's voice echoed through the palace as Ibrahim was brought before the king. "You have defied me long enough. You have insulted the very foundation of my kingdom, and now you will face the consequences." Ibrahim stood tall, his face serene and unflinching. He was not afraid. "I have not defied you, O king," he replied calmly. "I have simply called the people to the truth. You claim to be a god, but you are merely a man, a creation like the rest of us." Nimrod's eyes flared with rage, his pride wounded by Ibrahim's words. "Do not test my patience, Ibrahim. You speak of truth, but I will show you the power of my kingdom. The Tower of Babel will stand as a testament to my might, and your God will be nothing but a myth." The challenge was clear. Nimrod would destroy Ibrahim's God, but Ibrahim, knowing that his God was eternal and beyond any human's reach, was not afraid. This would be a confrontation not just of wills but of faiths, and it would test the very limits of human pride and divine power. As the day of reckoning drew near, the people of Babylon watched in fear and anticipation. The Tower of Babel loomed over the city, a silent witness to the king's challenge to the heavens. It was a monumental task that lay ahead. Would the king's arrogance lead to his downfall, or would Ibrahim's faith be tested beyond measure? The battle for the soul of Babylon was about to begin, and the outcome would change the course of history. The confrontation as the days passed in the Tower of Babel continued to rise higher into the sky. The tension between King Nimrod and Ibrahim grew. The challenge had been made clear and could not be ignored any longer. Nimrod, in his arrogance, believed that no human could defy him, let alone challenge his claim to be a god. His heart burned with fury as he thought of Ibrahim, who had dared to speak out against him and his gods. For Nimrod, this was not just a matter of religion or belief, it was a matter of power and control. He could not allow such defiance to go unpunished. Ibrahim, on the other hand, stood firm in his faith. He knew the truth, and no earthly power could shake his resolve. He had witnessed the arrogance of kings before, but none like Nimrod. The king's ego knew no bounds, and his pride blinded him to the reality that he was just a mortal man. Ibrahim was not afraid to face him, for he knew that the one true God was with him, and that power was far greater than any human king could ever possess. Nimrod summoned his court, and the people of Babylon to gather at the foot of the tower. The grand structure loomed over them, its immense height a physical representation of the king's immense pride. Nimrod stood at the top of the tower, his voice loud and commanding as he addressed the gathered crowd. His words were filled with arrogance and threats, as he declared to everyone within earshot that his power was absolute, and no one could challenge it. "I am the king of Babylon," he shouted, his voice echoing across the city. "I will not tolerate any challenge to my authority, not from Ibrahim, not from anyone. This tower is a symbol of my greatness, and no god will ever stand in my way. Let it be known that whoever dares to defy me will be destroyed." The people watched in silence, some in fear, others in awe of the king's confidence. But among the crowd, there were whispers of Ibrahim. His followers had gathered, their faith unwavering. Ibrahim's message had spread like wildfire, and the people were beginning to question the legitimacy of Nimrod's claim to divinity. Many feared to speak out, but they could not ignore the stirrings of doubt that Ibrahim had planted in their hearts. It was on that day that the confrontation took place. Ibrahim, accompanied by his few loyal followers, entered the grand palace to face the king. The people stood in awe as they witnessed the scene unfold. Ibrahim, standing tall and resolute, approached Nimrod with a calm that only further infuriated the king. "You dare to enter my palace, Ibrahim," Nimrod sneered. "Do you not know that I am the king of this land? That I hold the power of life and death in my hands?" Ibrahim met his gaze with unwavering composure. "You are a king, Nimrod, but you are not a god. The one who created you and all that exists is the true power. Your arrogance blinds you to the truth." Nimrod's fury boiled over, and he leaped from his throne. "I will show you the power of my kingdom. You speak of your God, but where is he now? Why does he not come to your aid? If your God is so mighty, let him prove it. Let him come down and stop me." Ibrahim, without flinching, spoke with a voice that was both firm and calm. "My God is not a God who comes when summoned by the likes of you. He does not need to prove himself to anyone. He is the creator of all things, and his power is beyond comprehension." The king's face twisted with rage. He could not stand the thought that someone would stand before him, unafraid and confident in the face of his immense power. "Enough of your words, Ibrahim. If your God is so great, let him show himself now. Let him come down and destroy this tower. If he cannot, then I shall prove that I am the true God." The challenge was set. Ibrahim knew that this would not be a battle of physical might, but a test of faith. The outcome would reveal who truly held power, the God of Ibrahim or the false claims of a self-proclaimed king. Ibrahim raised his hands to the heavens and spoke a prayer so powerful that it seemed to shake the very air around them. "O Lord of the heavens and the earth, you are the creator of all. Show these people the truth. Let your power be made known, and let all who follow falsehood be humbled before you." As Ibrahim finished his prayer, a great silence fell over the crowd. The air felt charged with an unseen energy, as if the very fabric of reality was being tested. Nimrod stood, his arrogance unwavering, but a flicker of doubt began to stir in his heart. He had believed that his kingdom, his power, was unchallenged. But now, for the first time, he began to wonder if perhaps he had overestimated himself. The people waited in anticipation, unsure of what would come next. The Tower of Babel stood as a silent witness to the unfolding drama, a symbol of human ambition, now caught between the forces of pride and faith. But nothing happened. The tower remained untouched. The sky did not fall, nor did any force descend from the heavens to stop Nimrod. It seemed as though Ibrahim's prayer had gone unanswered. Nimrod laughed, a cruel and mocking sound. "See, Ibrahim, your God does not come. My power is absolute, and your God is nothing but a figment of your imagination." Ibrahim, however, did not falter. He knew that the one true God worked in ways beyond human understanding. He knew that this moment was a test, not just for Nimrod, but for all those who had gathered to watch. The real power, Ibrahim knew, was not in the destruction of the tower or in any grand show of force. It was in the unwavering faith that could withstand all challenges. "I have no need for my God to show his power through destruction, Nimrod," Ibrahim said, his voice steady. "His power is in the creation of life, in the sustaining of the heavens and the earth. And even if the skies do not open now, it is not for me to command. It is for him alone to decide when and how to reveal his will." The king's laughter died down as he stood in stunned silence, and the crowd was left in a hushed awe. Ibrahim's words had struck a chord, but Nimrod's arrogance refused to allow him to admit defeat. The confrontation between the two had only just begun, and the future of Babylon would be shaped by this clash of faith and pride. Wrath of Nimrod, the confrontation between Ibrahim and Nimrod, had shaken the very foundation of Babylon. The king, humiliated before his people, could not let this challenge go unanswered. His pride had been wounded, and he would not allow a mere man, no matter how faithful, to defy his rule. Nimrod, whose ego was as vast as the tower he had built, saw this moment not as a test of faith, but as a direct threat to his reign. Ibrahim had questioned his divinity, and for that, Nimrod would make him pay. The next day, a dark cloud hung over the city. News spread quickly that Ibrahim was to be brought to trial. The king's wrath was boundless, and he had decided that this time, Ibrahim would face the full force of his power. The people gathered in the grand palace, murmurs of fear and curiosity filling the air. They knew that whatever was about to happen would change the course of their lives forever. Ibrahim, however, was not afraid. He had stood before Nimrod once, and he would do so again. His faith was unshaken. As he was led through the palace gates, his followers watched with bated breath. The king's soldiers surrounded him, their swords gleaming in the sunlight. But Ibrahim walked with a calm dignity, his steps steady and firm. The grand throne room, where Nimrod sat high upon his throne, was filled with an air of tension. The king glared down at Ibrahim, his eyes burning with hatred and rage. He had to make an example of this man, to show his people that no one, no matter how strong their faith, could defy the king of Babylon. "Ibrahim," Nimrod said, his voice seething with anger, You have insulted me, defied me, and humiliated me in front of my people. You claim that your God is greater than me, but I will prove that I am the true power in this land. You will pay for your insolence." Ibrahim did not flinch. He stood tall before the king, his face calm and composed. "You may have power over this world, Nimrod, but you do not have power over the Creator. No matter what you do to me, I will not deny the truth of my faith." Nimrod's anger boiled over. He could not stand to hear such words from a man he considered beneath him. He rose from his throne, his voice rising in fury. "Enough of your talk, Ibrahim. You will learn that I am the one who decides who lives and who dies. You will be destroyed, and your God will not save you." With a wave of his hand, Nimrod's soldiers advanced on Ibrahim. They seized him roughly, dragging him to the center of the room. The people watched in silence, their hearts heavy with fear. They had seen the king's wrath before, but they had never seen him so filled with rage. Ibrahim's followers were powerless to intervene, but they remained faithful, watching their leader with hope in their hearts. Ibrahim knew that whatever happened next, his faith would not be shaken. He had no fear of death, for he knew that his God was eternal, and death was but a passage to the greater truth. Nimrod, seeing Ibrahim's calm demeanor, grew even more enraged. "You still resist even now," he spat. "Very well, if you will not bow to me, then I will make an example of you. You will suffer, and the people will see that defiance leads to destruction." The king gave an order, and the soldiers began to prepare for the punishment. They built a great fire, its flames crackling in the air as they grew higher and higher. It was a fire that would burn through anything in its path, and it was meant to destroy Ibrahim completely. The people watched in stunned silence as the flames danced, their heat radiating across the palace courtyard. But Ibrahim, still resolute in his faith, did not waver. "My God is with me," he whispered to himself. "He is the creator of all things, and he has the power to protect me, should he will it." The fire was ready, and the soldiers prepared to throw Ibrahim into its flames. But just as they advanced, a strange silence fell over the crowd. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. It was as if the very earth was waiting for something to happen, and then it did. At that very moment, when the soldiers were about to throw Ibrahim into the fire, a powerful gust of wind swept through the courtyard. The flames seemed to freeze in place, as though the wind itself was pushing against them. The people gasped in awe. This was no ordinary wind. It was a force beyond their understanding. Ibrahim stood tall, his hands raised to the heavens, his faith unwavering. He knew that God's power was about to make itself known. And then, before anyone could comprehend what was happening, the fire began to shrink back, its flames retreating as though they had been extinguished by an invisible force. Nimrod's face turned pale as he saw the miracle unfolding before his eyes. The fire that had been prepared to consume Ibrahim was now nothing more than a small flame, flickering and dying out in the wind. The people, too, were in shock. They had never seen anything like this before. It was as if the very laws of nature were being defied. Ibrahim, standing unharmed and untouched, lowered his arms and looked toward the king. His eyes were filled with quiet confidence. "This is the power of the one true God," he said calmly. "No matter what you do, Nimrod, you cannot defeat him. He is the creator, and his will is greater than any man's." Nimrod's fury reached its peak. He could not comprehend what had just happened. He had ordered Ibrahim's destruction, yet Ibrahim stood before him unscathed, the flames of the fire having no power over him. The king's arrogance had been shattered in that moment, but his pride refused to allow him to admit defeat. Instead, his anger turned into a desperate desire to maintain control, no matter the cost. "I will not be humbled by a mere man," Nimrod muttered under his breath. "I will destroy you, Ibrahim, no matter what it takes." The battle between Nimrod's pride and Ibrahim's faith was far from over. What had just happened was only the beginning of a far greater struggle. Ibrahim had shown the world that the true power of God could not be overcome by any earthly king, but Nimrod, unwilling to accept his defeat, would stop at nothing to hold onto his kingdom and his false claims to divinity. The final test, the events that had unfolded in the court of King Nimrod, left the people of Babylon in a state of confusion and fear. The flames that had once been meant to destroy Ibrahim had been extinguished by an unseen force, leaving the king's challenge unanswered and his pride shattered. The miracle that Ibrahim had witnessed was now known throughout the kingdom, and whispers of faith began to spread through the city like wildfire. But Nimrod, his arrogance still burning, could not accept that his power had been exposed as weak in the face of Ibrahim's God. His desire for vengeance grew stronger with every passing moment. Ibrahim stood unharmed, his faith unshaken, his heart steadfast in the belief that his God would protect him. He had shown the people of Babylon that the power of the one true God was beyond compare, but Nimrod's fury had only been ignited. The king could not allow the people to see Ibrahim as anything but a threat. He needed to prove that his kingdom was still strong, that his power could not be challenged. With a clenched fist and a heart full of rage, Nimrod made his final decision. "Ibrahim has humiliated me before all of Babylon," he said, his voice cold and filled with venom. "But I will not rest until he is destroyed. His God will not save him from what I will do next." Nimrod's soldiers, ever loyal to their king, began preparing for the next stage of their plan. Ibrahim would not be cast into the fire again. This time, Nimrod had something far more sinister in mind. The king would imprison Ibrahim, and through isolation, hunger, and torment, he would break his spirit. He would show the people that no man, no matter how faithful, could stand against the might of Babylon. Ibrahim was taken from the palace and led to a dark, damp dungeon beneath the city. The walls of the prison were cold, and the air was thick with despair. His hands were bound tightly, his feet shackled. But despite his circumstances, Ibrahim's heart remained unbroken. He had faced the flames and survived, and he knew that this was another trial to test his faith. No earthly force could defeat him, for he was under the protection of the one true God. The dungeon was silent, save for the faint sounds of rats scurrying through the walls and the distant dripping of water. Ibrahim sat on the cold stone floor, his mind focused on prayer. He was not alone in that cell, for he carried with him the peace of knowing that God was watching over him. His body may have been bound, but his spirit was free. Days passed in the dungeon, and Ibrahim was given only scraps of food and water. His strength began to fade, but his resolve remained unwavering. Meanwhile, Nimrod sat in his palace, confident that his plan was working. He believed that Ibrahim's faith would break under the weight of starvation and isolation. But the king did not understand that the strength Ibrahim drew from his faith was more powerful than anything Nimrod could impose upon him. The people of Babylon may have seen their king's power as absolute, but Ibrahim knew that true power came from the Creator of all things. As Ibrahim continued to endure the harsh conditions, the people of Babylon began to notice a change. Whispers of Ibrahim's continued survival and unshaken faith began to spread. His followers, who had been in hiding, were emboldened by the example Ibrahim had set. They saw his suffering not as a sign of weakness, but as a testament to his unyielding faith in God. The people began to question the king's rule, wondering how a man who had been cast into a dungeon, isolated and forsaken, could remain so resolute. The walls of Babylon were closing in on Nimrod, but he refused to acknowledge the cracks in his rule. Meanwhile, a change began to stir within the dungeon itself. It began subtly, with a warmth in the air that seemed to emanate from the walls. Ibrahim, deep in prayer, felt a presence around him. It was a feeling of peace and strength, as if the very universe itself was watching over him. And then, the miracle happened. One night, as Ibrahim prayed for strength, a beam of light pierced through the darkness of the dungeon. The light was not of this world. It was radiant and powerful, emanating from the very heavens themselves. The chains that bound Ibrahim's hands and feet fell away as though they had been shattered by an invisible force. Ibrahim stood, untouched by hunger or thirst, filled with the strength of God's grace. His heart swelled with the assurance that no matter the trials, his faith had been the key to his survival. Outside, the guards who had been assigned to watch over Ibrahim were suddenly struck with fear. They looked upon the dungeon with wide eyes, sensing that something extraordinary was happening. They heard the sound of chains falling to the floor. But when they entered the dungeon, they found it empty. Ibrahim was gone. The news spread quickly, and Nimrod was furious. He could not comprehend what had just happened. "Where is he?" he demanded. "What sorcery is this?" The king searched the city for Ibrahim, but the man of faith was nowhere to be found. Ibrahim had disappeared as if the earth itself had opened up to protect him. Nimrod's soldiers scoured every corner of the kingdom, but no trace of Ibrahim could be found. And then, a message came. A messenger, trembling with fear, arrived at the palace with news that would shake Nimrod to his core. "O king, it is said that Ibrahim has been seen, and he speaks to the people. He speaks of a power greater than your own, of a God who is not bound by earthly chains or prisons." Nimrod's face turned pale with disbelief. Ibrahim had not only survived the dungeon, but he had returned to his people, free and unbroken. The king's power was slipping through his fingers, and he could no longer deny that the people of Babylon were beginning to see the truth. Ibrahim's faith had been a beacon of hope, and the people were turning to him, rejecting the false divinity that Nimrod had claimed. Nimrod, in his rage, ordered his army to march to the city center where Ibrahim was speaking to the people. He would stop Ibrahim once and for all. But as the army advanced, something incredible happened. The sky darkened, and a storm began to brew. The people of Babylon gathered to hear Ibrahim's words, and they witnessed a power greater than anything Nimrod had ever seen. The final confrontation was about to take place. But this time, it would not be a battle of armies or fire. This time, it would be a battle between truth and falsehood, between humility and pride. And the fate of Babylon, and perhaps the world, would be determined by the outcome. The end.